We can wait a few more minutes before starting until like 4 past as usual. Hi, Bill, if you can hear me.
Good evening, I can. And can you
Great.
confirm you can hear me?
Yes.
And I do not know if I can enable my video, but it looks like I can't, which is interesting. Now you should be able to see me as well.
Yes, I see you.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that works though. Hello, Christian. Thank you, Christian, for volunteering, helping taking notes. So let's give 1 more minute before starting.
Marco, do you plan to go to IETF 116?
Yes, I should be there on site.
Okay, great. All right, I'll see you there.
You too? Oh, great.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, that's my plan right now, that I will be on site.
So at least when I booked, the closest hotel was also the cheapest one.
Really? Okay.
Yes, that was strange, but I took advantage.
Right.
So which one was that?
I should check for the name, but it's really less than walking distance from the meeting venue. You can't get it wrong, really.
Send me the name on Telegram.
Yes, we'll do.
Yeah, but Yokohama is a very easy town to get around. So even if you stay closer to the train station, it takes only I think like 10-15 minutes to get to the venue, which is very easy.
Right.
Has the registration already begun, by the way? I actually have not had a chance to have a look.
Oh, yes.
All right,
I think in a few weeks you have the cutoff for the early bird registration.
Yeah, it's early February.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to do it quite quickly. And book my flights now too. So.
Okay, but it's 4 past now, and there's a few nice people here, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to this interim meeting of the core working group. I am Marco Tiroca. My co-chairs are Jaime Jimenez and Carsten Bormann. And this is an official IETF meeting, so we've been recorded. The Not Well applies, so get familiar with it if you're not already. And it's not just about IPR, it's also especially about our code of conduct, so please be nice and professional with each other. The agenda for today is also in the notes. As usual, we'll spend some time with the conditional attributes document that Bill will present. is still in working group last call. More reviews and comments have come also recently. Then we go through two of the core conf documents, mostly young seed that Carsten will present. And I will actually show a status update related to ongoing points that we are discussing for the href document. Does anyone have any bashing to propose to this agenda? Okay, then before we really start, just like to thank Francesca for wrapping up with the remaining core errata earlier today, and I think all of them are closed now. Great. Then, Bill, the floor is yours with the conditional attributes document. You can now take control of the slides.
Okay, should I just share my screen?
Even better, you can hit the second icon from the left on the top and select the PDF slide deck for your presentation, and then you can control it.
Just a minute. Second from the left, that's join queue, ask to share slides. Okay, good. Got that one.
That's it.
Yes. All right. Conditional attributes. Okay, got it.
Right. Please
Can
go
you
ahead.
see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Let me, in that case, just do a few little modifications so I can enable my video as well, so you can talk it that way. Okay. Am I coming through?
Yes, we also see
Thank you. Okay, great. So hello everyone. So I'm Bill Silvarajan, and I'm here to talk about our draft conditional attributes for constraint RESTful environments. So this draft is co-authored by Michael Costa and Alan Soloway. So I'm going to present just a few slides containing what we have done since the last IETF meeting when I presented the last slide set. Okay, so the current status is this is the old slide set, Marco, but never mind.
Oh, I'm pretty sure we forced the reimport on Miteco.
Okay, no, that's no problem. I can, Yeah, that was the only slide that was not up to date, okay. But that's fine. Okay, just getting back. So this is the current status since the London meeting. We were at version 05 before, and there were many of the issues were already closed, and the draft was at working group last call. Then there was one other issue that needed to be resolved. So version 6 was submitted to resolve that one issue. And then there was a request. I mean, there was a question at the meeting whether we should request an early review from the IoT Directorate, and the consensus was yes. So an early review was requested, and then more reviews were also welcome. So going into details, what changed between 05 and 06 was that in 05 we had one section which contained some code, some reference code to illustrate the how the server can do processing of these conditional attributes. And the code was normative, and also it was very compact. We found out through the review that Marco provided before the IETF meeting that there were some issues with that compact code, and also it was possibly a little bit challenging to review because it was rather compact. So we took the decision to instead move the code away from the section that improved the readability. We put it in. Hello, can you hear me?
Now you're back again.
I disconnected. Okay, sorry about that.
Well, you stayed online. It's just that other than your presence, anything else crashed.
Okay, let me share the slides again. Sorry about that. share. Okay. So I was here, I think. Please confirm that you exactly at which point I disconnected so I can resume from there.
Yeah, it was half of the slide, I think.
Good. Okay, so as I was saying, we moved the reference code away from the main body of the text and added it as an appendix that was now informative. So there's pseudocode that doesn't completely illustrate all the conditional attributes, which would have been rather challenging, but I think it's rather a good example of how the processing can be done. So that was the major change in the document as it stands now. So that's at version 06. But then this specific slide shows what actually happened. So while we were at version 05 and before it became version 06, a review was requested for early review from IoT directorates, and Ines graciously accepted to review it. So it's supposed to be due on the 23rd of January. I think she's probably reviewing it now. So, but I'll have to make her aware of the new comments that are coming in as well. So that's going on from IoT Directorate. So the next thing is that just last week we received some working group comments on the core mailing list, and I would like to address the first one, which is a little bit easier, and then we can discuss for the second one, which is a little bit more involved. So the first one, the URL is there. It was about the PMAX attribute, and it's basically the how it can be used for the amplification attack on CoAP. So that is covered in a draft. So the observe was actually covered in a draft in TDDRG, and PMAX was singled out as an attribute that risks making the amplification attacks worse.
Bill, I suppose you are online again after a very quick offline period.
Okay, I'm trying to resume. If you can see and hear me, I'm sorry
Yeah.
about. I'm not sure why this is.
Are you on a VPN, perhaps?
No, this is a fixed
Hmm.
network from our university campus, so
Okay.
something else is happening right here. But never mind. Just a minute. I'll resume. Hopefully, this is the last time that happens. Okay. So I was here just now talking about the first mail that we received as a review, and I was mentioning that PMAX specifically was mentioned as an example of how an amplification attack can become worse by setting the attribute to very short timeouts. And the reviewer suggested that before publishing this draft, it should describe this problem and also normatively require some mitigation from the implementation. So after a couple of short discussions, I think what we need to do is to really work on the security considerations part of the draft to discuss basically not only PMAX, which is now described as C.PMAX, but also EPMAX, because while PMAX can be used for amplification attacks, EPMAX is used to adjust the cadence of the measurements at the server side, so it can potentially be used for resource exhaustion attacks as well. And so I think that is not that difficult to include into the draft. So we will try to do that. So definitely version 7 will include those things. If a review comes from the IoT directorate, then that will also be taken into account. Okay, so that's the first working group comment, and then the second one, which I think I can now display, is this specific example, does this specific comment that goes a little bit deeper into the principles of REST and about a conflict with the observe notification mechanism. So it was felt that the notification mechanism is supposed to provide the functionality of keeping the retrieved resource state in sync with the actual resource state. So the client always receives the latest resource state, but using these conditional attributes that interferes with the operation of observe, since using query parameters, you do not necessarily get the actual resource state, but you get the resource state that is obtained after filtering. And if you are applying observe on that, then you cannot really get the newest resource state. So that's the justification for this, and the resolution steps are still open. So we probably need to discuss this further. We had initial discussions. So our original sentiment here was that I do not think we have actually violated any conditions. So these conditional attributes are effectively a hint. The server can choose to ignore them if the server wishes. But on the other hand, I appreciate these comments as well, that effectively we need to think about whether query parameters actually interfere with the operation of observe. And if it does that, then the proposal here is that do not try to change how observe works, but change how the resource is represented on the server with the query parameters, and then afterwards set an observe relationship on that maybe new resource or a virtual resource, which is then more accurate to the client's needs. So I think this is important to discuss today. What I'm open to comments and questions. And is Michael here also? I'm not sure. Oh, Michael, you're here. Yes, that's good. So Michael is also the co-author here. So what do you think?
Michael, go ahead. Yeah, you need to explicitly take the mic. You're just in the queue now. Yeah, great.
Oh, everything's taking a long time. I'm sorry. I'd like to hear if there's some other comments first, because we kind of have considered a position on this, but we want to hear if there's anyone, like Christian has been in this discussion as well. Is there anyone else? I guess no one else has raised their hand. So I think that fundamentally what we're looking at is first the observe. Oh, say Karsten has his hand up. I'm gonna kind of let Karsten go first.
Yeah, I would just like to simplify the statement of this comment as don't fork CoAP. So whatever we do here should allow using implementations of CoAP that are already around there and don't know about this specification. So this is really the interesting part of the requirement here that we have to keep in mind. So if the CoAP implementation has to do something that a CoAP implementation usually doesn't do, then we probably messed up. But if the server itself gets new semantics, that's fine.
Oh yeah, then Christian.
Just to emphasize, I agree with the sentiment expressed by you and on the slide that this is not the latest state of the resource, that we're not altering the latest state property of 7641. We are just creating a new resource that now has a new latest state, and that latest state gets rendered faithfully, so all is fine in my book. And I don't, as I understand the specification, it doesn't, as Carsten said, fork co-op, as long as nobody expects that these particular query parameters would work with any resource that is not advertising them. And I don't think this is happening, so all is fine.
Michael?
Oh, wow. There we go. It takes literally like 5 or 6 seconds to unmute. So, yeah, thank you, Christian and Karsten. I think that clarifies what the real concern might be here, is that we have sort of created a little subversion of CoAP that might have problems interoperating with other endpoints on a network. I don't think we've done that, but I think it deserves further consideration. So I'll think about that. But I think that my main point was going to be what Christian said, and that's why really I wanted others to weigh in first, was that, well, first, we're not really saying that you have to use query parameters here. There are other ways to use these. These are just basically a set of definitions of filters. But I see the concern comes about when we suggest that you could use them as query parameters. But I think that concern is mostly mitigated by the fact that, by the widespread agreement that the use of a query parameter creates a new resource, or at least a new resource state. And so what we're observing, it's actually very much like Klaus proposes. I don't know if we're supposed to use names or not, but that what we're doing is we're creating a new sort of resource state that gets observed. So we're not really changing the way observe happens. We're creating a new progression of resource states that's derived from the initial one that's a filtered version. And that's why I don't think it really breaks anything, but I think it does deserve some further consideration and maybe some elucidation of very particular scenarios where there might be problems. I can't think of any, but I would like to ask the people that are participating in the discussion to think about that and try to come up with some more concrete scenarios that might actually be problematic. Klaus and I sat down over some paper in Montreal a couple of years ago and kind of went over, like, here's how the resource state changes and here's what gets observed. And it might be useful to try to recover that diagram. But I think going forward, I don't really see a problem with this. I think we're just looking at sort of more discussion to close off the issue. And in terms of the amplification attack, or the, I'm kind of in agreement with that it's hard to be really normative. The commenter suggests that we normatively try to normatively remediate it, but I don't think we really can, because I can imagine industrial control systems where you'd want to have Pmax times that are like 1/10 of a second or less to basically do fixed rate sampling. And maybe we should just be really clear that you have to have it, set the times within the context. And you could also disallow setting of a time. So we could, something that's not really normative, but it kind of looks like it's at least a concrete solution, would be to suggest that a user of this might look at the network context and look at their typical network latencies and all that, and provide a guideline for how to bound Pmax so that an attacker could not set a value smaller than a certain value that's derived from your own network installation. So we could be pretty specific about the remediation, I think. And I played with this, so I kind of know, what works and what doesn't a little bit. I think that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the same kind of mitigation can be applied also to EPMAX in this case, to prevent the clients from manipulating how often the server updates its resource states and things like that as well.
Christian?
Yeah, as we've come back to the PMAX thing, personally, I don't think that it is up to this document to say anything more than non-normative remarks that, by the way, make sure that you're adhering to 7641, because any amplification mitigation that needs to happen already happens by a proper implementation of 7641 that limits the number of outstanding non-confirmable notifications and creates confirmable notifications in between and doesn't create too many ongoing ones and so on. So that's all there. If what is there is insufficient, then we might want to update 7641, but not everything that produces values that can be observed and that might do that in a short pace should need to worry about this, because this is what we have an underlying protocol for, and the underlying protocol should provide the adequate measures.
So I think coming from my perspective, so I assume that the idea about projecting the new resource state also kind of applies to how PMAX can be handled in this interpretation. We do not necessarily need to prevent the server from sending resource state updates periodically to the client. This is what I believe. So I don't think the idea of PMAX not being able to fit into this idea of having this virtual resource states or resource states is a problem.
Michael?
Yeah, a brief comment on that is something I meant to mention earlier, and that is the idea of trying to build in the idea that the actual value of a number has to change for the resource state to be observed as being changed. That there are a lot of scenarios where an update occurs, but the value doesn't change, and you want that to create an observation. So PMAX is just a special case of, these things only being hints. The server should never be prohibited from sending an additional notification if the value of a number didn't change. I think that's way too much, exerting way too much authority on our part on how people use this stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, I had a few comments also, Bill, starting from EPMAX, actually. Yeah, that was not part of the original comment from John, but you want to cover it as well, which is good. Do you plan considerations along the line of the server should still think well for its own best about not just accepting whatever value a client proposes?
I think that has always been in the guidance of the document. So it's there's never a must in that sense, except for PMAX. I think there was a must condition, but most of that are may or should. And indeed, I mean, nothing is mandated to the server, like what Michael just suggested. That's too difficult. So the server is free to decide what it wants to apply.
Okay, well, it's still considerations.
Yeah.
After all, anyway.
Yeah.
Right. On the main thing of the second topic, instead, I think there was also another point mentioned in that review in the end about PMAX to be better considered as a co-op option because it's kind of extending observed, because you're opening for the server sending a notification even if you wouldn't otherwise, because the resource maybe has not changed, which also connects to what Michael was mentioning before. And that was kind of irrespective of, well, keeping the draft as is as an extreme or moving to a new direction. What about it?
Michael.
So I just wanted to clarify what I heard. You're talking about adding a co-op header option to define the max behavior, and then being able to thereby exert more control over it.
Yeah, I read that proposal that way. It wasn't spelled out explicitly, but it was mentioning about, yeah, this is kind of started to extend observed, and we use options for extending. Any opinion on this? Christian?
Christian, go ahead.
That would sound like reintroducing a lot of the HTTP cache control that we deliberately left. That was before my time. That was deliberately left out of core.
Fair point.
The way it's here, at least, goes the way of the client very politely asking the server to reduce its max age, which at least doesn't alter the caching model.
Yes, absolutely.
There might be clearer solutions, but I like keeping the caching model simple.
I think that's a very good point. Carsten?
Yeah, I think it's we probably need to hone our understanding of what changing the resource state means. So, for instance, if I have a new temperature reading that happens to have the same value than the old temperature reading has, the new reading may have a different lifetime. So that is useful state for the client to have. We encode the lifetime in the attribute max age, and that actually may not change because it's now referenced to a different point in time than the previous notification. Yeah, what exactly does it mean for the state to be different? Another thing that a server may want to tell the client is actually I don't have a new measurement, and I'm a little bit surprised by that. I would have expected to have a new measurement now, but it didn't come. So here is the measurement with a smaller max age than the previous one had. So the max age plus the time when it actually was sent, in this case, stays the same. So if you define the state in terms of expiry equals transmission point in time plus max age, the state didn't change, but the information is still new because the server kind of authoritatively says, I don't have a new measurement. So I think we need to understand a little bit better what we mean by saying there is new state that actually warrants doing a notification. And I don't have a clear opinion on what the right result is here, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than just looking at the payload and saying only the payload, a change in the payload generates a new notification.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I would like to, be able to think about it in terms of that each resource state when you're using conditional notification, particularly when you're using PMAX, each resource state has a finite lifetime, and whether you're using, I guess using max age seems like it makes a lot of sense, but each resource state has a finite lifetime. Therefore, when you communicate the same value again, you're communicating a new resource state with a new end time. And there's no reason that we should try to prohibit that interpretation unless someone can think of like a really good, what does that actually break? Because depending on the value changing just seems to be really artificial. And maybe we could like broaden our notion, as Carsten said, of resource state and include things like, well, I'm expecting it to be updated. And if it isn't, that's, that actually defines a new state as well, because it has new timing.
So do you think, Michael, we could include that kind of justification in the description of PMAX in our draft?
That's a good idea, is to really kind of elucidate some of the thinking, especially from this discussion, because it's been a really good discussion. And maybe we need a little more discussion on agreement. We need to reach a little more agreement on what we mean by resource state, but modulo that, I think we should really do that. That's a great idea.
Okay.
I think these kind of clarifications were good to do anyway all along on PMAX specifically and on the whole spirit of the draft, actually. So it's good to have text that clarifies to future readers. This is not extending observed. This is not forking co-op.
Yeah. So actually, sorry, Marco, to have jumped
No,
in.
go ahead. I'm done.
No, I actually what I took from these comments regarding the discussions of resource dates and notifications is also that that there is very little guidance out there in how they can interfere with or query parameters can actually interfere with the correct operation of observe and specifically making sure that the clients receive the correct or consistent state to the server. So I think it might be nice to consider that as a broader work. In general terms, if you actually today have a co-op implementation that can do observe, and then you set the query parameter with this, not necessarily conditional attributes, but any query parameter on it, does it actually change the way observe behaves? So that would be good to clarify, maybe in the things to things research group or even in core, because it's not really there in the observe draft, observe RFC. Sorry.
Kirsten, you were saying something? Oh, I guess not. Christian.
I think it's there, but it's hidden behind the definition of a resource, and that might need clarification.
Yeah. Are there any questions anymore or any comments?
Just to be sure we don't forget, Michael before also mentioned again, yeah, all along you were really observing something special here, like a new spatial representation of the resource and what is going on with that. This is also probably something to phrase out explicitly.
I think that needs to be done, because that was the recommendation that if we are including that kind of clarification, then the draft probably will benefit from that discussion, and going forward to future reviews, then that's something that could be easily explained as well.
Yeah, I guess it will come back again otherwise. It's good to clarify it in general and also to avoid getting back to it again. Michael.
Okay, so just to summarize, our work item is to basically update the draft with a prototype discussion along these lines, but also we're going to take that discussion broader and make sure that we have agreement on some of the basic concepts.
Yes.
But that shouldn't get in the way of us updating the draft with language we think is appropriate.
Okay, I guess I'm done with the presentation, so I'll close the deck and hand over control to you.
Yeah, so one thing that I think needs to be in this discussion is how proxies that are on the way actually get to do the right thing. So we haven't discussed this here yet, but the proxy needs to be able to find out what's going on without interpreting these query parameters.
Christian?
Is there an actual question on what is the right behavior there, or is this just about how do we phrase it? Because from my understanding, the proxy's role is pretty clear in that if the proxy does not know what is going on, those are just a lot of different resources, and the only question, the open question, if there is one, is whether the proxy may rely on the information that it has learned by observing its own traffic, that there's a resource is adhering to that specification, and then apply the specification on its own. To me, that is the only real open question here. But maybe
yeah, so The worst case situation that we often had in mind when discussing this was that you have a client that is observing a resource through two proxies, and between the two proxies, for some reason, you cannot use observe. So proxy number one actually has to poll proxy number two. And the job of observe is to enable this by providing all the information that proxy one needs to properly poll proxy two, and to send notifications in case this is actually needed. And I think we need to describe how this interacts with such a worst case proxy concatenation.
But isn't that something we should describe for proxies in general? Because if it is not there, it's missing for everything that is doing proxies and not just this particular specification.
Yes. I mean, we have to solve this problem in a general way. The view that some of us have is that we did solve the problem, and now there's new stuff coming up, and we need to understand whether this breaks the way we have solved the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to think about, I think for a reverse proxy, it's clear that parameters are meant for the endpoint, but for forward proxies, it's not so clear.
Excusing me, especially the forward proxy needs to just transparently route these things because it's not authoritative on this.
Yeah, that's kind of the perception right now.
So how much can be said in this document then? If not anything at all.
It's yeah. I think we're identifying quite a lot of fundamental issues, but I don't mean with the document. I mean fundamental issues with how we do resource retrievals and resource state updates.
There could be a special considerations section, I guess, that talks about proxies and other.
Yeah, also considering that so far the document has always been informational, so.
Right. I have to. I know that we did have one section talking about proxy and caching, but now I'm struggling to find that section. I thought it was in implementation considerations, but oh yes, we do. The last paragraph in implementation considerations, but you might be right. It might be more prudent to have a special section on proxy considerations.
Yeah, it was just good, Carsten, to bring that up. I'd forgotten that was a big part of the discussion that Klaus and I had also. As part of that diagram had two proxies, and what if they disagree, and etc. We can talk through that also, because I think that we don't really have any showstoppers there. It's just that we need to make it clear what the expected thing is, and that it could work this way, kind of thing.
So one other thing that's easy to forget is that the local cache in a client has a number of the same considerations that a proxy has. So when you fix things so they work through a proxy, you already know that a local cache in a client is not going to create you a problem.
Okay, I think we will try to document that as well.
If I may make a final remark on how thorough this all needs to be, in my understanding, a situation where there is where there is a lag without observe may legitimately degrade a bit in the number of notifications that are exchanged, because the polling will happen a bit slower than the notification. So just because we're considering that such a lag might exist doesn't mean that such a lag needs to faithfully represent exactly the same outcome, because there is a degradation, and that is okay, and that may happen. It's just that eventual consistency still needs to be there, and it probably is.
Thank you, and please double check it's captured correctly in the minutes, because it was a very good point. Any other comments? Anyone? Okay, Bill, I think you and your co-authors have a bit to digest and reflect on the next
Yeah.
version. I suppose you'd also like to
Yeah.
work in parallel with whatever comes from Ines' review.
Yes, I think that would be great. So yeah, we'll wait for her review, and then we'll try to. Meanwhile, I think we'll use the editor's copy in GitHub to just reflect some of these things.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and the next in line will be Karsten with CoreConf.
Okay. Yeah, the funny thing that Meet Echo doesn't allow you to unmute while you are manipulating slides. Anyway, I wanted to talk briefly about two drafts of CoreConf. So to remind everyone, we have 4 documents in the CoreConf suite. 9254 is an RFC. Michael, do you want to say something?
No, I just unmuted so that I could unmute faster.
Okay, yeah, that's really a problem, that you cannot see whether people are fully unmuted or half unmuted. Thank you. So, yeah, 9254 is done. We are working on Core SID, and we have great feedback from Rob Wilton that is improving the document. We have Core Komai that has passed Working Glass Call for a while, but that we couldn't really progress because there was still uncertainty around Yang Sibor and Core SID. And finally, we have Core Yang Library, which passed Working Glass Call a while ago, but then the Yang community has advanced so much in that time, we may have to revisit this at the time when we get to it. But that's not on the agenda today. Let's talk about Core SID and Core Komai for this meeting. So in Core SID, if you look at the GitHub repository, there are essentially 2 pull requests here. One, I think, is mostly done and could be merged. That's the 146 that addresses the need to document our objectives for doing SID management. So what do we want to get right? Here, it took us a while to get feedback for that, but the feedback is getting better and better. So yeah, maybe that's the way it works. And the other observation is a more specific one about the need for a stable field in the SID file. Well, the point about the SID file is this is the way the people who do a module communicate with the people who use the model. But it's also, and I think we haven't paid enough attention to that aspect, it's a way for the people who do a module to actually communicate among each other. And there are some assumptions about who has control over what that just don't work in a more general situation. So that's why the SID file issue comes up. And only a couple of minutes ago, Michael Richardson made a comment on PR 141 that is really useful, and that really addresses this aspect by making sure we actually can tunnel the information that needs to flow between the people who do a Yang module. Yeah, so I'm not expecting that we can fully discuss this here today. Michael, you muted?
Yeah, so I could quickly render a patch to Piang to be able to read that new field in and save it with whatever value it had before. And I think that is easy to do, whether it's this version or another version. The real question is, what do you do to mark it as stable, and how does that work, and who does that? And that's a little bit of a, yeah, what option do you put on the Piang command line? But it's also who puts that option and when.
Yep.
And that is actually more of a process issue. So I would suggest we don't go with an enumerated. As I said, I think we can get more information in there that's useful. But anyway, regardless of what we put in that JSON, because it's all JSON file right now, so we could actually change our mind several times without changing too much. I think we can make Piang mostly work, and I think I'm clueful enough now to do it. But we need to decide what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's a really good point from Michael. So encoding who made that statement has the problem that the who might also need to imply why and when and other questions you might have about that. So I think we have to be a bit careful that we don't create a God variable here that encodes the whole history of the universe in one identifier. So I think we really have to go through the SID mechanics that are defined in the document and make sure the various types of communication that we want to have are open. And of course, a client, so somebody who uses a module, doesn't really care about all that. The client just sees the SID allocation, but the actors that actually work on the module and modify the module and finish the module, those actually need to communicate in a clear way. So Rob gave some feedback 2 hours ago, and that's really useful and very detailed. So we will take a few days to actually process this. But one point he brought up was we need a way to record obsolete SID assignments. So if a SID has been used in previous iterations, and just want to record that you are not going to reuse this because it's going to confuse implementations of the older versions, there probably needs to be a way to carry these around in the SID files. So there may be some tricks to encode this by recording high watermarks in the ranges or something like that, but I think that gets complicated quickly. And since these SID files are not messages you send back and forth all day, we don't have to be particularly optimal when encoding this information. So maybe having a status of obsolete is useful. The interesting thing about obsolete SID assignments is that you don't really care about the Yang path. You only care about the SID number that has been consumed and now is no longer available. So we will have to look at that. Okay, so I brought up what's currently in the SID file, and Michael has argued we have to expand on this and define or describe actually who made the determination that something is stable, or what unstable actually really means. So that will be a discussion we probably will have to convene a design team for again. So my plan is to spend some time on processing Rob's feedback. This will certainly take us into the next week. Because he also has some new issues, some of which may be very simple to fix, but some of which also may require some thinking. And we also have a few issues that we left open until we understood our direction on 141 and 146. So we have to work on these. Yeah, the plan probably is that we will have one or more design team meetings, edit the document, and then at some point generate a -20 that actually covers these issues. Any comments on that? So then I would like to quickly talk about CORE-COMI. That has been in a frozen state for a while. And now after thawing it, we found that we really have an issue with the K query parameter. Now, the issue here is that we're trying to be at least a little bit HTTP compatible here by allowing GET access. But the native way of using CORE-COMI is actually using fetch, because then we can describe what we actually want in terms of CBOR encoded Yang identifiers. And that is just the right way to do this. And the K parameter always was a way to express these Yang identifiers in a way that it can be put into a textual representation in a get UI. So this is really the place where we need to work. And just as a reminder, the current definition for how to set up this K parameter is really complicated, because it requires you to look at the Yang data type and apply different encodings for the information you find in these Yang data types. And most of these encodings produce either decimal digits or base 64 digits. But for strings, the existing K definition tries to be transparent, which is great. But yeah, that creates a problem, as we will see in the next slide. And actually looking at all these cases, most of them actually already use URL safe base 64 encoding. And most of the ones that don't use decimal integer encoding, which is definitely less efficient than base 64 encoding. So that there is a single, well, Boolean is a special case, and the single case string, which also happens to be the most likely thing you want to put into a GET request. That is handled transparently. And yeah, the current proposal does not optimize for this frequent case. So we might have a 3 to 4 expansion here. So looking at this some more, actually the full K parameter is assembled together from keys that are encoded as on the previous slide, by separating them with commas. And yeah, that doesn't take into account that the strings you might have as leaf values that turn into keys. These strings actually also can contain commas. So we definitely cannot stay with what we had in the previous draft. That actually does not work. So we could simply simplify this table and say everything is base64 encoded, or we could actually optimize this a little bit by turning the whole thing into a CBOR sequence if we have more than one key, and encoding the whole CBOR sequence in base64 URL. And that is way more efficient than the comma separated stuff. Christian.
If I understand correctly, the whole point of this exercise is to be a bit more compatible with HTTP. Now, if we do custom stuff here anyway, like the CBOR sequence, can't we just make fetch happen and fetch it is?
Well, if you ask me, yes. So the decision to have both fetch and get was taken some 3, 4, 5 years ago, when there were still CoAP implementations out there that didn't do that, and that didn't do fetch. So we might decide that this simply is overtaken by events, and you should be doing a fetch. Yeah, the disadvantage is that not all requests actually require a key, so just sending the SID may be a nice way of doing things. I don't know, Michael? Oh, I thought I saw something move there. Sorry. Yeah, that's an interesting suggestion, to simply get rid of the thing, so we simplify this radically.
Just briefly for context, that fetch is now around and established was the guidance this group gave to the DNS over CoAP authors.
Yes. So the question really is, how much of Corcoma is already deployed out there in weird environments that make using fetch hard? Because the DNS stuff is not out there, so we really have a greenfield situation. But Coma has been discussed for 10 years now, and this draft 11 has been out for a couple of years, and people might have implemented that. And we probably want to ask people whether that is the case. But apart from that, yes, I agree with you. Not doing it is always the simplest. A component that is not present has the smallest amount of bugs. Great. So the question really should be, it's 2023. Do we still have to cater to non-fetching implementations? And if not, we can simplify things a lot. So that's great input. Yeah, my plan is to get this K simplification done. Now, this draft, I'm interested in moving this draft forward because I'm actually the shepherd for that. And we need to find out who actually can push this forward, so we reach the finishing line. So I think all the authors are currently not focusing on this. Well, one is retired and so on. So there certainly will be the usual editorial dance, and so that needs to be done. And of course, we need great feedback, like we just got from Christian from the working group. to do this finishing drive. So again, the next step is doing a design team meeting and getting as many of the original authors together as possible, and then decide what the content of the -12 revision of the draft will be. -11 has been expired for quite a while now, and yeah, -12 needs to get out at some point in time, and we should decide what we want to have in there. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Carsten. Any more input or comment, anyone? If no, then we can move on to the last item. And that's on me. Right. It's about the href draft. I'm not an author, but this is a follow-up of a point we started to discuss at an interim meeting in October. So I thought of giving a follow-up on what happens since then about it. The topic in question is about the efficient encoding of the URI scheme with a negative integer as an identifier, which has been possible from the start, actually. In the slide, you can see just the current construction in the latest revision of the draft, where some schemes are mentioned up front with intended negative integers from abbreviation. Otherwise, more in general, you can have the scheme indicated as a text string or a negative integer. And what we started to discuss in October was having a better care, especially in the interest of extensibility, on an easier use of the negative integers, opening for well, more schemes to be considered upfront for an abbreviation in the href document, and for a new registry where the IDs can also be actually registered. And since this is good to do in general, seemed enough motivation to do that, but we also had some case in point already. One is another document in core, multicast notification, where there is in fact an open PR already from Christian proposing to revise the format of one message, where we need to express, well, URIs for now, and for now in a textual representation, but instead to use CRIs for that, and of course wanting to use the negative integers, which would also have as a side effect the simplification, the radical simplification of yet another registry defining that document. And a subset of that would also be useful in yet another document for the value of a co-op option, where CRIs would also be better off to use, although limited to scheme and authority only. But back to the main topic, again, the discussion started in the interim in October. You can check the minutes for the details. And right after the interim, a pull request followed up from Carsten. It's still open. And Carsten and I had further discussions on the topic end of last year. And things progressed quite a bit, and the pull request got updated. But there is especially one still open point deserving attention, we think. But to give a status update, well, that was the easy one, defining upfront a bit more URI schemes that deserve to have a negative integer ID already from the href document. So the overall CDDL definition was updated as you see in the slide, and Carsten also started a wiki to collect schemes for which we want to have IDs also defined upfront. But that was pretty easy and uncontroversial. Then the main thing was about creating the registry, and of course defining proper registration guidelines around it. So the registry was also added to the PR. It's quite simple. I think the original idea was specification required, but it was just good enough to go for expert review instead. It was quite clear from the start, so that was also added that you really need to be careful in registering IDs in the 1+0 on 1+1 space. That's really for IoT use cases, and especially being sure that you are considering a scheme that can enjoy a wide use. Otherwise, you still have the 1+2 space, which should be kind of the default choice if you want. And after some discussion with Karsten, we thought it's just better to consider, especially that that space to handle the corner case, if you want, of schemes that are registered only provisionally according to the status they have in the URI schemes registry. So they should really take an ID in that space, unless the designated expert has really strong reasons to believe some of the more precious IDs are better considered. Then there was also the point to ensure to raise awareness about the existence of this new registry in the first place, and of CRIs altogether as a side effect. So what was also added to the PR in the IANA consideration was a request for IANA to add a note to the URI schemes registry about mentioning the existence of the new URI scheme ID registry and the policies around registration there. And in a sense, so far so good. But there it comes the big open point, which is when exactly should the scheme ID registration happen. We want to avoid a situation where a new URI scheme is registered and an ID is not, and then later on it is. And then that would compromise a lot interoperability with people that are just used maybe for years about using the textual representation only. That of course remains possible. So with that in mind, the original proposal, which is the current content of the PR, by the way, is to admit, okay, the early pre-registration of IDs from the href document, of course, but then future registrations can happen only at one specific point in time, meaning when the URI scheme itself is registered, now or never. And that will solve the problem that we want to avoid. But we think it may still leave a problem open, meaning the authors of the URI scheme registering it might intentionally not care or have no reason, or no one may have a reason at that point for registering an ID. But that reason may come up later on, and then it'll be too late. Based on the current idea, it would not be possible to register an ID anymore. So maybe the current proposal is too strict in a sense, meaning it can still be about registering the ID now or never when registering the URI scheme, but maybe it shouldn't be just optional to consider, but it must happen. And hopefully it can also be automated. So considering this possible alternative approach, a revision would be pre-registering an ID for all the current existing URI schemes, of course, choosing wisely the correct number space. And then every time a new URI scheme is registered, that automatically triggers an ID registration too. And looking back to the minutes of the October interim, actually ESCO proposed this in the first place. And there was also an exchange with Christian about possible complications that create for conversion from URI to CRI. So that's where we are now. It's good to have more input, especially on this open point. And we also plan to continue the discussion on Friday this week during the Coral href design meeting. Don't know if you want to add anything or clarify anything, Karsten, that I might have missed.
Yeah, I just would like to remind people that this is really the XDish problem that we have had in a large number of protocols in the IETF, where there was a way to have a provisional identifier for something. Often this identifier started with X dash for extension. And then at some point the feature went mainstream, and people thought they might now be able to allocate a permanent identifier for the feature. But if people already had implemented the X-dash identifier, then there was absolutely no reason to move to the new identifier, because the old identifier was going to be perfectly interoperable, while the new identifier is only going to be known by new implementations. And since nobody uses the new name, also new implementations actually won't pick it up at all. So it's as good as only using the old implementation, the old name, all the time. And given that we would like to reap the benefits of using numeric identifiers for schemes as far as possible, instead of getting stuck at the text identifier when the numeric identifier hasn't been registered early enough, that is a very special form of this X-dash problem.
Thank you. So is there any early input, especially on this open point today already? Yeah, otherwise I'm sure we'll get back to it Friday this week for sure. And by the way, more in general on the href document, yeah, there are still a few open issues and PRs. Other than this, I think some issues can actually be closed already, like 53 and 54. I'm pretty sure the latest revision already addressed those. But we can also do some cleanup about that on Friday. Okay, that's it. That's the current status. Let's see, no comments in the chat, and no one in the queue. We are at the end of the agenda, or at the AOB. So is there anything else you want to discuss about CORE today? Seeing none, then huge thanks to Christian and Rikard for taking minutes, and talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.